My God, O my God, verily thy servant humbled before the majesty of thy divine supremacy, lowly at the door of thy oneness, hath believed in thee and in thy verses, hath testified to thy word, hath been enkindled with the fire of thy love, hath been immersed in the depths of the ocean of thy knowledge, hath been attracted by thy breezes, hath relied upon thee, hath turned his face to thee, hath offered his supplications to thee, and hath been assured of thy pardon and forgiveness. He hath abandoned this mortal life, and hath flown to the kingdom of immortality, yearning for the favor of meeting thee. O Lord, glorify his station. Shelter him under the pavilion of thy supreme mercy. Cause him to enter thy glorious paradise and perpetuate his existence in thine exalted rose garden, that he may plunge into the sea of light in the world of mysteries. Verily, thou art the generous, the powerful, the forgiver, and the bestower. Abdul Baha.
Thank you very much. I welcome my brother Sharif Zain. Sharif Zain is in Los Angeles. My younger brother, 5 years old. He's in Pasadena. They're suffering from the floods, the earthquakes, and I guess the apocalypse. I don't know. I guess we can expect wonderful things and bad things at the same time. All right, you guys. So before we enter our topic that you may like or you may not like, I don't know. It's a storytelling, but it's not my life. It's someone else's life. I just want to update on.
Sorry, Mr. Zein, there is something not quite right with the sound. I think maybe somebody doesn't have their.
Violeta, is it okay now? Welcome to Mr. Mahmoudi.
Sorry, Fariba, I muted you while you were talking. I apologize. I was trying to find.
Thank you, Allah, for everybody.
Allah, wonderful. Wonderful. And Alex, of course, is our great friend from Norway. Love to see you always. And Shirin, and Munir, and Abbasi, and Del Sabeti. Oh my God, it's all these wonderful people. So anyway, as I was saying, we were following up on, because it's about teaching, and I'm not doing historical things. I'm not doing amazing deepenings. I'm just sort of down to earth, and we want to talk about teaching stories, especially current ones. And so we're not going to go back and tell all our past, I guess, spiritual children or our past teaching years from past years. But I was just talking about what happened lately. And I've been following the same people. Nothing has changed. Komono is still reading and he hasn't spoken. So he's doing his own reading. He's working for me every day. He supervises kids, but now he's helping building buildings, carrying bricks, because school hasn't started. We're building another school about 500 yards from here. So Komono is reading. The mechanics is reading and praying. I don't know. So that's another mystery. The driver of my brother, of my son, Nicolas, I finally catch up with him, and I called him for an hour rental so I could spend of taxi, so I could give him the new garden. So I don't know what he's thinking. And all of them, they have O's in their names. One is called Bruno, Komono, and the other one is, and Okoko. So I figured I've got to catch somebody that has also some O's in his name. So I chanced upon one of my teachers who's also lifting bricks. His name is Toto. I figured, you can't just pass opportunities, because he's a wonderful person. He's a French teacher of French. So I said, listen, I said, I'm really tempted, I have to give you this message because your name has double O's, and I've been teaching people with double O's, so you are predestined. So he looked at me. So I just gave him, not the prayer book, the New Garden. Finally found a copy. We don't have that many books around here. And so I figured, what was he going to react? Positive, negative? He very politely, he took the book, was very happy. And I figured I'm not going to hear from him. So the next day, he comes and says to me, I saw your name in the book. I said, what? He says, Kamal. It says Kamal. He must have gotten to page 25, and he saw the months of the year. So he got far into the book, and he saw the months of the name, and he saw the month of Kamal. And so he made the connection. That's cute. This is like, somebody, you give him a book, you never know what he's going to do with the book. And he read the book. He must have read the book. But some people don't say anything. And so you basically cannot be asking him every day, what do you think? Have you prayed? So there's four of them with double O's reading things. We'll see what happens. And one is tempted to basically, you wish you had like hundreds of books, small books, not maybe you can't afford like 20 euro books, but not pamphlets either, but because you can give them to everybody around here. I don't see myself in Paris or in London going around the street and talking to somebody and say, here, you want to read a book. But in this place, anybody you can see, the people walking down the street here, you see them on the right, or the guards here, or the drivers. If you talk to them for 2 minutes and they say, well, Baha'i is what? And you explain for 30 seconds and you say, here is the New Garden, but like a small version of it that doesn't cost much, but you can read. It looks like a book as opposed to a pamphlet. Or you give them a booklet of prayers, but has maybe 10 prayers as opposed to just giving a sheet of paper. You never know where that goes, because people take it. So you can, I don't know if you can call that teaching or not, but it seems to me that if you just open your mouth and just instead of handing it out, and you can consider that to be seed planting somehow, because you may never see that person again, right? Now, all that teaching that you are doing and I'm doing has nothing to do, of course, with the kinds of teaching that, let's say, Rohia Khanum was doing when she was traveling across the world, or Martha Root when she was talking to all these major figures. But today, I'm going to be talking about Dr. Muhajir. And I'm going to read to you the part of his life just when he was a youth. And I'm going to start for a few seconds to talk about when he was 19 years old until the day he married. And his wife is writing a book that I'm sure you've read. I haven't read it. I've read parts of it. And I may not get very far. I'm going to have to read to you. So if you can accept me reading the story, I try to be slow in reading it, we can at least live through the life of someone who became a pioneer, a knight of Baha'u'llah, and a hand of the cause. Was named by Shoki Effendi at the age of 34. An amazing, amazing person. And we cannot talk about him unless we start reading what his wife says. It's very important. So if you've read the book and you know all that, you may not like to sit and listen to all this, but I was so touched. I read it like 2-3 times. And I just would love to be able to have been there and to have followed the life of Muhajir. Now, they're pioneering. Some of the pioneering stories in their life when they went in the 10-year crusade and became a Knight of Baha'u'llah. As you know, my parents became Knight of Baha'u'llah too. Some of the things that they went through exactly at the beginning when they were actually moving with one-way tickets as opposed to round-trip tickets, selling their belongings and not speaking the language and all that stuff. That's exactly what my parents went through. It's as if those people that left in the 10-year crusade that made the Guardians so happy, they all went through the same thing. Now, we are not, of course, we cannot do the things that they have done. They were pioneers, and they became knights, and they opened places that were close to the faith. And Dr. Muhajir, of course, became the world's expert in mass teaching, and it was a very simple approach, but he taught hundreds and thousands. I mean, you know, I guess if we could do that, we should do that. But, you know, again, Abdul Baha never asked us to go and teach thousands. He said only teach one a year. It's not very difficult. So let me read to you, if you permit me, the story excerpts. Now, I hope I'm not going to bore you. Now, just before I talk about his marriage in 1951, in 1943, when he was only 19 years old, he organized the Baha'i class, okay? Just thought of it, and invited about 25 of his friends to attend. I never heard anybody do that. And so he thought it was time that all of them became familiar with the administrative order. And so he invites, who does he invite to talk? He invites Mr. Furutan. We just spoke of Mr. Furutan, and Mr. Nakhjavani, and Miss Adelaide Sharp. So they were invited to teach the class. And it was mostly men. I guess at that time in Iran, they wouldn't mix men and women. So they were held in the home of one of the youth. Now, many of those apparently became later pioneers. I mean, this is the early 1920, but imagine to think that you could organize something like that and the initiative of Mr. Muhajir. Now, he was 19. He was born in 4th of April, 1923. Now, in the same year, he encouraged his friends to take a year off from their studies in order to visit and inspire the Baha'is around the country. This is the concept of a year of service. Now, then in 1944, he is accepted to medical school, but instead of going to medical school, he decides to leave his studies and go to a place called Razaiya, a city in the northern province of Azerbaijan. So again, he always gave priority to the faith, and he wanted to become a doctor only because he thought that that was the best way to serve the faith. All right, so he still in 1948, he was appointed to serve on the National Pioneering Committee. And so finally, his wife says he found his niche. He was so excited about pioneering that he wanted to go himself, and he wanted to go to Arabia. Now, why Arabia? I don't know. It's a place where you couldn't teach very easily. It's a Muslim country. So, but at the time, foreign pioneering, apparently Iran was not something that people did. They used to do Baha'i service in the country, but the idea of going overseas had not started in Iran. So the Baha'i administration in Iran had grown from a very few local assemblies into one of the strongest national communities in the Baha'i world, with a mature national assembly and at its head. During the early ministry of the Guardian, many of us, she says, the wife of Mr. Muhajir, had become familiar and comfortable with the idea of traveling within Iran to teach, even moving there. However, this new 45-month plan from October 46 to July 1950 was unique in that it called for pioneers to go to other countries. So Dr. Muhajir, we call him Rahmat. She calls him Rahmat. He just studied it to death because he wanted to find ways and he wanted to go himself. And he used his utmost efforts to encourage the friends to pioneer, especially to Arabia. And so anyone who volunteered to go was his guest at a lavish meal of chilo kebab. This continued after even the completion of the plan. A Baha'i intending to pioneer to Arabia would call him and ask, "What about my chilo kebab?" And we would all go out and have an enjoyable evening together. Mr. Gul Muhammadi, a longtime pioneer to Arabia, recalls that before leaving, when he was having his chilo kebab, he told Rahmat, Dr. Muhajir, that he wished he could have a copy of the Kitab-i-Aqdas to take with him to Arabia. Editions of the Most Holy Book were very rare, the only copies being those which had been printed in Egypt many years before. So on the day of his departure, one freezing winter dawn, Rahmat met him at a bus stop bearing a gift. It was his own copy of the Kitab-i-Aqdas, wrapped in a gold and green silk handkerchief with his name embossed in gold lettering on the flyleaf. He told Mr. Gul Muhammadi, "You're a pioneer. You deserve this more than I do." Now, again, he wanted to go to Arabia. So let me start where I wanted to start from the beginning after I give you this background, with his marriage. Very exciting. So Mrs. Muhajir says, our marriage was in 1951. Rahmat's parents and mine were old friends. You know that Mrs. Muhajir is the daughter of Hand of the Coast Furutan. So the parents and both parents were old friends, and we had lived in adjoining houses for some years during my childhood. Rahmat and I had been seeing each other in many youth meetings and met once more in 1948 when I was attending summer school in Karaj near Tehran, of which he, though only 25 years old, was the director of that school. In 1951, I had graduated from high school and with the approval of the guardian, was preparing to leave for England to continue my studies. When Rahmat heard this, he immediately asked my father for permission to marry me. He told my father that two things had prompted him to seek permission to get married at this time. One was that he wanted to marry me before he left to pioneer to Arabia. And the other was that I was leaving Iran and he had no intention of spending the rest of his life with another girl. So he just jumped. He said, I want to marry your daughter. So he later told me, she says, that for some years he had prayed in front of the photograph of Abdul Baha. Who does this? Who does this kind of thing? See, when I get to this place, I choke. He says he prayed to assist him in this marriage. This is a future hand of the cause. He's 20, 25. He wants to marry the daughter of Furutan. He prays to Abdul Baha in front of the photograph for years. But she says, listen, I have always felt a great love for him anyway, since my childhood. So it seemed the most natural thing for me to marry. I mean, it was no problem for her. So our families met together several times. And when we agreed, my father felt he had to seek the permission of the guardian for any change in my plan to go to England. So in answer to my father's letter concerning the proposed marriage, we received a telegram from Shoki Effendi that said, approve, praying blessings. Rahmat and I were married on 15th of October. And this was 1951. So a few months after our marriage, Rahmat graduated from medical school and promptly announced his decision to pioneer to Arabia. He was out. He was going to live alone. At that time, I was in very poor health, and my doctor strongly advised me against living in hot climates. The solution would be for Rahmat to go alone until such a time as my health would allow me to join him. We finally decided humbly to seek the advice of the guardian. See, always the guardian, the right to the guardian. In his loving reply, okay, and he advised Rahmat to stay in Iran until we could live together. We didn't let him go. So the events of our future life made us realize that each adversity brought hidden bounties, and that submission to the will of God brought greater harvest than could even remotely be imagined. Now, I'm still talking about the marriage. I mean, they haven't even done anything yet. I mean, when I go maybe next week, because I won't be able to get very far today, and you enter in the jungles of Sumatra and the islands where he actually went and they became Knights of Baha'u'llah, you'd be amazed at the kinds of things he did. I mean, no humans does that kind of stuff. Nobody does. I don't think anybody will in the future either. Anyway, but we're still in the marriage. I mean, you know, he's excited. He wants to practice medicine. He wants to go to Arabia. The guardian says, no, you stay both together. So my illness and the postponement of Rahmat's cherished wish to pioneer opened to him much greater areas of service. He was ready to leave medical school, medical profession, all this, anyway. So he just wanted to go to Arabia. Although he knew that he could not teach the faith, but in obeying the beloved guardian, he was rewarded with teaching thousands of souls around the world. I mean, obviously, because he didn't go to Arabia, he ended up going to Sumatra, and you know, he taught thousands of people. So staying in Iran meant that Rahmat had to begin practicing as a physician. So he took a job in Isfahan at a hospital attached to the Point 4 Marshall Plan. So this position was much coveted by doctors, and it was prestigious and all that. Now, in 1953, the gates of pilgrimage opened for Persians. It was closed during the war. So they both went to the Holy Land, and of course, Rahmat was the only man in the group. All the other Persians that were there were women. And of course, the guardian would receive them separately. So, because he was the only man, the guardian received him in the gardens. And they walked in the gardens and visited the shrines of the Bab and Abdul Baha, where the guardian chanted the tablet of visitation. He says, in later years, whenever he visited the holy shrines, Rahmat recalled those days of pilgrimage with great yearning. He said that when he walked in the gardens of the shrine of the Bab, he could feel the presence of the beloved guardian and hear his melodious chanting. He would recall Shoki Effendi talking about the 10-year crusade and about pioneering to win the goals of the plan. The guardian spoke in a most thrilling manner about the 10-year crusade to Rahmat. He was so happy with his plan that the guardian loved the 10-year crusade, that we could feel the vibrations of his spirit. So to Rahmat, he spoke to him about Southeast Asia and the Indonesian archipelago. And he asked Rahmat if he knew where Singapore was. Then he told him that the area was inhabited by the brown race who were waiting to respond to the message of Baha'u'llah. So now she talks about the guardian and his beautiful smile. Now in the presence of the guardian, Rahmat was transformed. At nights, when we all sat around the dining table of the Persian pilgrim house, we recounted the day's events. Rahmat's love for the guardian had increased 1,000-fold. He was willing to give his life there and then if it would please his beloved. The guest book on the mansion of Muhajir reflects his devotion to in his words, and Dr. Muhajir wrote, I offer humble thanks to the threshold of the beloved who granted me the immense bounty to behold the beauty of the Bab, the majesty of Baha'u'llah, and the kindness and hospitality of Abdul Baha in the countenance of the beloved guardian. May the lives of his lovers be sacrificed in his path. So now, so when he decided, after meeting the guardian, that whatever he did in the past didn't appear very insignificant to him. He just wanted to serve the guardian and have to go and just please the guardian and go to these islands. Now, he says after returning, he spent hours on his knees. No, this is in the Holy Land. He spent hours on his knees praying at the holy shrines, supplicating Baha'u'llah to make him worthy of some small service. So when he went back to Iran, he was trying to leave immediately. He loved the guardian. Now his love became adoration. So she says that he was busy doing medical work and all that, and coming home, he would pray. He believed that pioneering was a great bounty of which not everyone was worthy, and that only through prayer and supplication might God grant it. The habit of praying for hours at night continued through his life, and he only prayed for spiritual things. He never prayed for material things. So I was present on many occasions when, for the success of a teaching project, or the purchase of a Baha'i center, or the opening of a new era to the faith in some remote corner of the world, he repeated the prayer of the Bab, saying, God suffices all things above all things, 314 times. 314 times, chanting the tablet of Ahmad and the fire tablet after each 100th repetition. He very seldom prayed on his own behalf. After he was appointed hand of the cause, he said daily prayers to be worthy of this great bounty and to be able to serve the beloved guardian. And he prayed Baha'u'llah to give him humility and to safeguard him so that he would remain steadfast in his covenant. Now, then there's this interesting story here because there was an international conference, intercontinental conference in 1953 in New Delhi. Now, he found out when he went there that there was a possibility of going to these islands because Collis Featherstone, who became a hand of the cause, he was member of the NSA of Australia. He suggested that we go to the Mentawai Islands. The Mentawai Islands was a goal of the Australian Assembly. And so they were trying to swap, says, okay, you guys, you're Persians, you can take that because you want to go there, and we take one of the goals of Iran. So they couldn't fill the post because he needed to be like a physician, and Rahmat was a physician, so he could fit. So he was able to try to get that slot. Now, I guess people tried to discourage him from going because they were a young couple, and they weren't sure that they should go, and they had to go through committees to be approved for this pioneering post. So now, but he had made up his mind. So what happened is that, and this is very interesting. He always quoted this quotation of Abdul Baha about teaching. He says, "Oh, that I could travel even though on foot and the utmost poverty to these regions and raising the call, Ya Baha'u'llah, in cities, villages, mountains, deserts, and oceans. Promote the divine teachings. This, alas, I cannot do. How intensely I deplore it. Please God, you may achieve it." So he also would quote Shoki Effendi about this passion for teaching and the importance of teaching. And he says, he wrote this quotation and he put it in all his notes, I guess, time and time again, and underlined it. And using Shoki Effendi's words, he says, each and every one of those enrolled in the army of light must seek no rest, take no thought of self, must sacrifice to the utmost, must allow nothing whatsoever to deflect him or her from meeting the pressing, the manifold, the paramount needs of this preeminent crusade. It's all about the crusade. So as soon as they had made the decision to fill the goal of Australia, she left Isfahan to consult with the International Goals Committee in Tehran. So this is just a new committee and so on. And so she went by herself. So the committee's deliberations took about 45 minutes. And they advised me that the members did not think that we were the right people to go to these islands. The explanation sounded completely logical to me. We were too young. We had been married for only a short time and had only just begun to settle down. Rahmat had a good job in Iran. There was little prospect of a job for him as a physician in the Mintawi Islands. My friend, the doctor, lovingly, who was sitting in that committee, explained that the greatest tragedy for a physician was not to be able to practice his profession. He was speaking from his own experience as a former pioneer to Afghanistan. So the letter rejecting our applications was to be mailed to Rahmat in Isfahan, and Muhajir wasn't there. I was so relieved to be free of the ordeal of sitting in the presence of the committee that I ran all the way home. At that time, there were no direct telephone connections between Tehran and the provinces. I briefly conveyed the committee's message to Rahmat from a telephone office in downtown Tehran. Late that night, Rahmat arrived. He was absolutely livid. The Persian proverb, beware the wrath of a patient man, was especially true in this instance. He could not believe that the committee, which had received its mandate to facilitate the work of the pioneers, direct from the guardian himself, would reject volunteers willing to bear any hardship and face any eventuality. We had not asked for financial assistance, so Rahmat felt that the committee should not concern itself with our future financial stability. He asked to meet with the committee. Two of its members had been his university professors. His arguments did not persuade the committee to change its decision. Rahmat, of course, was in no way deterred. He requested a meeting with the NSA. Although my father was the secretary of that sacred institution, nothing in the world could persuade me to go to that appointment alone. So that memorable day still lives in my mind. She says, Mr. Afnan, a member of the local assembly of Yazd, who was also waiting to meet with the National Assembly. He told us about recent events in that city, the atrocities committed against the Baha'is by the fanatical mobs, the burning of Baha'i homes, the desecration of the Baha'i cemetery, and the beating of innocent men, women, and children. We all wept. Rahmat believed that this chance encounter with Mr. Afnan, a relative of the blessed Bab, was a bounty which would bring blessings to our future as pioneers. So our meeting with the National Assembly was quite different from our meeting with the International Goals Committee. All the members, which now include two hands of the cause, my father and Mr. Varqa, as well as two future hands of the cause, General Alai and Mr. Khadem, all members of the NSA, greeted us with much love and kindness. The members of the NSA understood the crucial importance of pioneering in relation to the goals of the 10-year crusade and sought to encourage those willing to offer themselves for service. My father had attended the New Delhi conference, which had been such a decisive factor in our resolution to go to the Mintawi Islands. At that conference, he had made a moving statement to the assembled friends, quoting from the words of Abdul Baha on the spiritual importance of pioneering. In the passages which had so stirred the hearts of those fortunate enough to attend the gathering, the beloved master likened these early days of the faith, when there was still the chance to render genuinely sacrificial services, to the time of the first Christians. The National Assembly approved our pioneering plans and assured us of his prayers. So NSA approved for them to go. Before going to the meeting, the National Spiritual Assembly, Rahmat had a dream of Baha'u'llah. She says, before the meeting, he had a dream. The Blessed Beauty was walking in the street of Tehran, carrying a very large rolled carpet on his shoulders. Rahmat silently went behind him and took up one end of the carpet. Baha'u'llah turned and smiled and expressed his delight that Rahmat could help him with his burden. Now, what do you think? What do you think of that? He dreams of Baha'u'llah, and he carried. That man became hand of the cause at the age of 34. So Rahmat did not want to waste a single day and immediately submitted his resignation to the hospital. She said, I stayed in Tehran long enough to arrange our passports and secure a 1-month tourist visa for Indonesia. 1 month tourist visa. It just reminds me of my parents, you know, when they left Egypt for Morocco, they had a 15-day visa. No job, same thing, you know, you just take off. You trust and you go, you know, that's the whole thing about faith. Faith is about that, you know, you just don't calculate, you just do it. So they took a 1-month visa for Indonesia. When I returned to Isfahan, we sold nearly all our belongings, including most of my jewelry. Within a few days, we were back in Tehran. As our funds were very limited, we bought one-way tickets to Jakarta via Karachi, Bangkok, and Singapore. Although we could have borrowed the money to pay for round-trip tickets, and all our friends advised us to, we did not do it. Rahmat believed that Baha'u'llah would open all doors. Return tickets would have given us a sense of security, which would induce us to leave at the slightest discomfort. We had about $500 to cover our travel expenses. Rahmat knew that after 1 month in Indonesia, our finances would be in such a state that we would be unable to purchase return tickets. So we finally ready to leave Iran. They had no knowledge of the conditions of life in the climate of the place to which they were going, never met anybody from there, and they got their visa. They only knew that the Indonesian islands were tropical, but they didn't know they even carried 2 suitcases, one with summer clothes and then one with like heavy stuff. I don't know, they expected to have some cold over there. And 2 one-way tickets and $500 in cash with them. And they took off. Now, I'm gonna stop now, maybe next time I'll tell you more of what happened in Indonesia. Now, I don't want to read in detail what they said, but basically, in just summary before I actually read it next week, they land, like most pioneers, land in this, you know, place that at first looks awful. The weather is so hot and everything's so difficult, and to eventually get to their islands, it's like there's a boat that goes there, but it goes once every 3 months, and you're in the jungle, and you know, and she was 10 years younger than her husband. She was 20, and he was probably 30 by then. And when you to serve a population of 50, which have this brown race, and this is indigenous people. Yeah.
Your sound is not good.
My sound is not good. What?
I don't know. Try it.
Can you hear me? Anybody can hear me?
Yes, we
sir.
hear.
Oh, you can hear me? Okay. So, I'm not going to tell you all that right now because it has to be told in the voice of that, because when you read the book,
Not now, not clear now.
it's so thick. Not clear. Not clear.
I'm going to relaunch that Zoom. So just hold
Hello?
on 1 second.
Sorry, clear, not clear. Okay, I don't know what's going on. What's
Yeah,
going on with
now
that?
it's okay. Now it's okay.
Her
I don't know.
voice is deeply torn out.
Sorry?
La voix est déchirée.
Hold on a second.
Vas-y, essaye maintenant.
Maybe 30 minutes. You know, from the Jakarta, Karachi, and Jakarta, and Singapore, and all this, and then they land in Bangkok, and then they arrive in Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia.
Hey, Dad.
You know, yes, ma'am.
On chat, somebody asked, what is the meaning of the carpet that Dr. Muhajir helped Baha'u'llah with?
Whatever it is, I mean, I have no idea. She doesn't explain. I don't know. We can all interpret dreams, you know, nobody's an expert in dreams, but obviously whatever it is, it was either a burden, it was heavy. So the fact that he helped Baha'u'llah carry it obviously made Baha'u'llah happy. So you can see the symbolism, you know, he's carrying. Maybe it's the old world order that is rolled up in a carpet and is going to be thrown away. I don't know, but whatever it is, well, maybe Baha'u'llah was taking the carpet to throw it away. Whatever it is, obviously the fact that Baha'u'llah, that he put his shoulder in and helped Baha'u'llah, and the Baha'u'llah looked at him in the back. I mean, Jesus, you know, I want to dream like that. You all want to. Maybe tonight we're going to dream of Baha'u'llah. Maybe we don't pray enough. That's why we don't dream of Baha'u'llah. I mean, remember, this hand of the cause, he prayed. I mean, he prayed. I don't know who prays like he prays. So, and then it answers to his prayers. It confirms. I mean, and when you become a hand of the cause, I mean, you're somebody. I mean, you know, there's no more hands of the cause in this. Finished. It's gone. That's it. Those were, you know, this is like, I don't know, like it's more than saints. I mean, I don't know. So any of us can think of whatever. This is, his wife doesn't even interpret it. She stays out of that one. But it's amazing that he told her. It's amazing that she wrote. I mean, so we are lucky that people do right. I mean, if also the lives and the difficulties and the suffering and the victory. So we are really very fortunate. And you come to this country. I was looking it up in Google. They have about 16,000 islands in Indonesia, the biggest Muslim country in the world. 16,000, 9,000 inhabited. And somehow these islands were the ones that Shoki Effendi wanted them to fill their goal. The myth. What did I call them? The myth. Mithani.
Mentawai?
Mentawai Islands. The Mentawai Islands. Anyway, I mean, that's like, and they're far off, and they are not the most plush islands. It's not like going to these fancy places, you know. So they arrive with so they arrived. It just reminds me of us when we came pioneering to the Congo. I mean, it's just an incident. We came when my wife and I came with Violeta, and my wife was pregnant with our son. We landed in Kinshasa. It was like horrible. I mean, you know, I don't want to compare, but I just want to tell you stories of you land. You came expecting somebody to meet you, right? So we were like expecting, just giving you a personal touch here. I mean, I'm sorry to make a parenthesis here, but we're expecting Dr. Davachi to meet us now. And this is not a coincidence, because Dr. Davachi happens to be the nephew of Dr. Muhajir. So, okay, so we are we're talking about the same thing now. And he was in Kinshasa, and in this book that is so thick with the million stories that I'm not going to get into because I'm just dealing with the initial part when before he became Knight of Baha'u'llah and the hand. The rest, you have like 500 pages of details of his life. I mean, I can't believe where he's been and what he's done. It's impossible it's all detailed here. You can't even reading it. It's so much. But anyway, I'm just talking about the beginning. So when we arrived, like when they arrived and they were waiting for a certain Mr. Paiman that was supposed to get a letter for them to meet them, and he never showed up because he didn't get the letter. We also were expecting to meet Dr. Davachi and his wife at the airport, and they were not in the country. So we didn't know what to do. We were just stuck in the airport. And the police and the customs were going through our stuff and opening the suitcases, and they found a cassette of my wife's. She was taking opera lessons from a major conductor when we were in California, and the guy grabbed the cassette and kept it for himself, and then we just didn't know where to go. Went in the cab. We went in at the time they had yellow, not the yellow cab, actually yellow color cabs, but the cabs were so run down. They're almost like the cars you find in cemeteries. You could see the road as we were driving from the airport. We could see the road. I mean, you look down and you see the asphalt. There's a hole in the thing. And we ended up going to some home, a Baha'i home that welcomed us, and finally met a Baha'i from the country. And the place looked like, it was like a cultural shock because there were no big buildings. Everything was flat, just shacks. I mean, so anyway, so when you come to a country for the first time, you kind of, my God, it's so hard. And so you can imagine Dr. Muhajir and his wife coming in this awful heat and not having anybody at the airport and have to find a way of managing and so on. Anyway, but that's what it is. That's the story. And the story is even worse than that. This is just the beginning. So, so anyway, they finally managed to get in touch with him through somebody who helped them with local money, go to the post office and called Mr. Payman. And finally, Mr. Payman, that was not at the airport, showed up. And she says, I cannot remember a happier moment than when we heard Mr. Payman greeting of Allah. Soon we forgot how exhausted and famished we were and started to take an interest in our surroundings. Jakarta was a charming city. On the way to his home, Mr. Payman expressed his astonishment that we had decided to leave Iran without a firm offer for a job. He assured us that he would help all he possibly could to secure a permanent visa for us. So Mr. and Mrs. Payman did the utmost to make our first night very comfortable. Our luggage was still at the airport, and so we had to borrow clothes from them that night, which was the start of our long years of pioneering. Is one of the most memorable and cherished events in our lives. I can still remember the feel of the cool air from the ceiling fan, the taste of the delicious food and the tea from the samovar, and the pleasant conversation we had with the Payman family, who were to become our dearest and closest friends. So the next section of the thing is what she calls our first miracle. It's early next morning, despite objections from Mr. Payman, Rahmat insisted that so they were trying to stop him, arrest it, just to get to know the country. He says, no, Rahmat's view was that his primary purpose in coming to Indonesia was to open the Mentawai Islands to the faith, so the goal of the crusade, and the Guardian wanted all this gold settled in the first year. Time was short, and there was only 4 months before the deadline. So Rahmat did not care about the type of work he could find as long as it took us to Mentawai Islands. So Mr. Payman finally surrendered, though it was not clear just where to start looking for a job. Rahmat's opinion was that they should start with the Ministry of Health and work their way down. So they started looking to go to the ministry. So they went and they met. Now, when Rahmat and Mr. Payman returned home that evening, Rahmat's face was radiant with happiness, and Mr. Payman repeated over and over, it's undeniably a miracle. When the receptionist at the Ministry of Health was told that Rahmat was a doctor, he was immediately conducted to the office of the deputy minister. There was a great shortage of physicians in Indonesia at that time. The Dutch colonization had come to an end in 1945, and the newly formed Republic of Indonesia was in the process of rebuilding its country. Doctors were desperately needed, but there were not many who were willing to apply, especially since they had to pay their own way to enter the country. Deputy Minister had kept Rahmat and Paiman with him the entire day. He had asked for maps, examined them for some time, and chose Bukittinggi on the island of Sumatra as a post for Rahmat. This is a beautiful city on a hilltop with cool and crisp air. During Dutch rule, Bukittinggi had been a vacation spot for the elite. So the minister, learning that Rahmat was accompanied by his young wife, had chosen it so that we could live in comfort. A house and servants, as well as a car and driver, came with the job. Rahmat would work for the state hospital in the mornings and have his own clinic in the afternoon. Wow, what a deal. This offer could have been ideal for anyone whose purpose was to accumulate wealth and live in comfortable life. Rahmat had another purpose. Bukittinggi is situated in the west of Sumatra, a few hundred miles from the Mentawai Islands. When Rahmat asked the minister if he could work on those islands instead of Bukittinggi, the minister treated his request as a joke. Bukittinggi, with a population of around 500,000, was without a doctor. The population of the Mentawai Islands was only about 25,000. The minister had not even noticed the existence of these islands before Rahmat pointed them out to him. They discussed the matter for the rest of the day, and the minister finally agreed that we could go to the Mentawai Islands on a trial basis. Years later, when we had become friends, the minister told us that he still could not understand how the agreement had been reached. See, that's what we call divine. That's what happens. Those are the things that happen that nobody can figure out, and you sort of wonder how. That's it. That's how God intervenes. Saying goodbye to Rahmat, the minister expressed his opinion that even if he survived the conditions of those islands on his altruistic beliefs, a white 19-year-old woman would not and could not endure them. Rahmat signed a 3-year contract with the Ministry of Health on the spot, the Mentawai Islands, his designated post. His salary was $25 a month, and he was to pick up the air tickets for Padang, capital of Sumatra, the next morning. What Mr. Paiman considered a miracle was not how swiftly the contract had gone through, but that of all the hundreds of islands of the Indonesian archipelago, the minister had chosen Sumatra, where the islands were. Any other island would not have given Rahmat the opportunity to fulfill the goal of pioneering into the Mentawai Islands. Now, this business of how God intervenes in a way where he sort of blinds the guy and he makes him accept to change his mind about the post is something interesting. I mean, each one of us maybe has that experience. I remember I had that experience in a different way when I was trying to leave pioneering, and I was teaching at the time. After leaving California, I was in Idaho, and I had a job as a professor of French literature and Spanish. And we tried to leave pioneering, but the International Gulf Committee had not answered our request for pioneering. And so I signed the 2nd-year contract. And right after I signed, the next day or the next week, we got an answer saying, you can go to Africa, go to Zaire, and if it doesn't work out, go to the Central African Republic. So I went to the administration, to the office, to the dean, and I said, I want to back. I can't stay. I have to go. I said, but you signed. And they wouldn't change their minds because they couldn't find a teacher at the time. And I don't know what happened. It's something like this, All of a sudden, for some bizarre reason, they agreed to let me go. So I was home free. I left. We just packed and went. So, these people that do pioneering in the 10-year crusade, or any pioneer in the world that goes and basically trust in God, and sort of you get doors open, things that you were in, jobs come your way in ways that you can't even believe. You know, I think I told the example when I was working in Zaire and I had a job, and they put my job, advertised it in the US in the Chicago Tribune, and I said this, I'm not going to get the job. I'm not going to stay because there's going to be competition. It turns out nobody applied because it didn't get printed somehow. So I got the job myself. Being in Africa, I got my job back. Whereas it would have maybe 500 applicants would have wanted to do the job I was doing for the US Embassy, USA. So anyway, so all of us see the divine hand intervene in different ways, whether it's for health and whether it's for opening obstacles, you know, removing difficulties. That's why you say remove difficulties, right? That's why you pray. So anyway, so these guys, now they're sitting there, finally get a job. So now the question is, you have to catch a boat to go to those islands, because these islands are really far away and they're islands. I mean, and nobody goes to these islands because it's very, very, I guess these islands were holding prisoners at the time. It was supposed to be the jail for people from Indonesia. So they had to go to a city called Padang to board the boat for the Mentawai Islands. So a few days later, we left Jakarta. Our luggage was much lighter now that we had disposed of all the woolen clothes. You know, they got rid of that stuff. Our days in Padang were mostly spent trying to learn the basics of Indonesian. Remember, they came out of Persia. I assume they didn't speak English. I don't know. I mean, they would speak Persian. And here to learn Indonesian, you get to talk to the people. You go with tourist visa, no job, and no language. So we were informed that the only means of transportation to the Mentawai Islands was a small state-owned cargo boat named the BEO, B-E-O, or Mina or Mina Bird. This thing, this BEO business, it followed no fixed schedule and set sail every few months. Every few months. Whenever there was sufficient cargo to warrant the expense. So we had to wait 2 weeks before we were told we could leave. Arrangements had been made by the governor of Sumatra for the boat to make a special trip to take the doctor to his post. The boat took 40 hours to cover the 100 miles or so that separated the Mentawai Islands from the mainland of Sumatra. 40 hours. That's a day and a half, 100 miles. The closest I had ever come to an ocean was in the north of Iran, when we had gone for a few days' rest to the beach on the Caspian Sea. To be tossed about for a night and a day on the rough waves of the Indian Ocean in this small vessel was not something that we had bargained for. There were no passenger cabins on this boat, but the captain had very courteously relinquished his quarters for our use. I slept on a small bunk for the duration of the journey. Rahmat was seasick most of the time and developed a severe headache, which no amount of painkiller could alleviate. In later years, whenever he visited pioneers on islands which could be reached only by boat, he would often tell me that he wished the friends knew how much he suffered to get there. Then they might treat his suggestions more kindly. If they just knew how much he suffered to get to see them, they would be much nicer to him. Nothing in our life had prepared us for the Mentawai Islands. We certainly had not seen anything like them in Iran, and the 4 cities we had visited on our way to Indonesia, Karachi and Bangkok, all this, were not remotely comparable to what confronted us at the moment of arrival. The turbulent sea and heavy rain had continued throughout our voyage from Padang. The boat had to drop anchor a long way from shore, and we were told to climb down a rope ladder hanging on the side of the boat. Then we had to board a rowing boat crewed by 2 men who who appeared to be completely naked. My first thought was to run back to the cabin and hide until the bio returned to civilization. However, my hand was held firmly by Rahmat, who was quietly chanting the tablet of Ahmad, obvious to what was going on around us. Now, speaking of cultural shock, Rahmat had a unique attitude to spiritual challenges. His only feeling on arrival in the Mentawai Islands was exhilaration that the goal assigned by the beloved guardian had been achieved. His first thought was that we should pray constantly that we would be worthy of this great honor bestowed upon us by Baha'u'llah. Our final destination was Muhara Siberut, the main settlement on Siberut Selatan, one of the 4 islands of Mentawai. Talk about the 16,000 islands, s'il vous plaît, 16,000, 9,000 inhabited. The residents lived on the islands since the time of the Dutch colonization. The Mentawai Islands had been used as a penal colony by the Dutch authorities. Hardened criminals were exiled there. They then practically forgotten. Malaria, combined with all kinds of skin diseases and other illnesses, the tropical heat and lack of medical attention resulted in extremely high mortality rate. The independence of Indonesia and the departure of the Dutch left a small number of Sumatrans on the islands without jobs or a source of income, so they turned to trading with the native tribal people of Mentawai. The indigenous Mentawais lived in scattered hamlets far from the Muara Siberut. The main crop of the island was coconuts, which they bartered for the poorest quality and cheapest tobacco that the mainlanders could buy. They had never received money and did not know its value. I saw this place as wilderness, far from the comforts of civilization. Rahmat saw a beautiful green tropical island with indigenous inhabitants whose pure hearts and minds were ready to receive the message of Baha'u'llah. He never equated lack of formal education and what most of us consider civilization with lack of intelligence or understanding. Prayers and the assistance of the assembled crew helped us slide down the side of the ship into the rowing boat. Our suitcases were lowered, and the 2 natives, mystified by our manner and appearance, rowed us to the shore. Word had already reached the village about us, and every one of the 200 residents, men, women, and children, had gathered to view the spectacle of our arrival. Mixed with the mainland residents greeting us were a few native men and women, clad only in very narrow loincloths, their bodies covered from forehead to ankle in tattoos of the most ornate and fascinating designs. Everyone was wading through mud, covering their heads with what I later came to know were banana leaves to protect them from the downpour. Rahmat and I were, of course, soaked to the bone. The rain and humidity posed no threat to our luggage, however, which had already fallen into the sea while being transferred from the boat. A narrow plank was thrown over the lake of mud for our benefit. Rahmat just waded into the mud while holding my hand and helping me maneuver down the slippery, wobbly plank. My patent leather high heels were not designed for this sort of thing, and after a few steps, I was flat on my back, struggling with the mounds of wet, slippery leaves, which were mixed in with the black, smelly mud. The facade of bravery that I had carried with me suddenly evaporated. I just lay there and burst into tears. This broke the ice. Suddenly, all those who had come to stare were transformed into sympathetic hosts. I was pulled out and taken to a nearby stall where the ladies helped me wipe off the mud. Rahmat, meanwhile, kept reminding me that we were pioneers to Baha'u'llah and that we had to maintain our decorum. My first purchase in the Mentawai Islands was a pair of rubber sandals to replace the high heels that I had lost in the mud, to the mud. With our few words of Indonesian, we tried to thank them for their kindness. It was then that we found the 2 men who were to become our translators in the following months. One was Eddie, a very pale and emaciated young man, a Protestant who had studied English for a few years at the mission school in Padang. The other was named Kamaluddin, or Ludin for everyone, a man of about 30, clad in a sarong with a traditional Indonesian black hat, who had studied the Quran and understood Arabic. 3 final blasts of the boat siren heralded his departure. It would not return for at least 3 months. Voilà. So, we are going to leave Dr. Muhajir and his wife in all this muddy. Wait till I talk about their house. Anyway, I guess that's what you do. Now, these days, nobody or not many people go through this anywhere. Nobody's asked to do that anymore. But it's thrilling, you know. It's like that's what the Knights of Baha'u'llah did when they went to this difficult place. I mean, some of the Knights didn't go there. Some people went to they went to Monaco or Andorre or I don't know, other places. This is pure jungle. This is really rough. But again, and the story is amazing because it's. If I continue next week, I'm not going to go. I'm going to just stop when something awful happened in this place, you know, and that cut short that story for Indonesia, because then the life of Dr. Muhajir, when he became hand of the cause, and responsibilities all over the place in Asia, but mostly in Africa. And the book is so thick, you know. If you have seen the book, I don't know if you can see the book, but the book, if you read, you know, so much. I'm just reading. I'm going to read the very few next pages, and then I'm going to read something about the end of his life, just the last few months. The rest, it is so much, and that he has been showing people and teaching people how to enroll the masses into the faith, you know, all over the place. It's fascinating. Okay, guys. Comments, additions, other experiences, questions. The floor is all yours. I hope you found it interesting. I mean, I found it exciting. I'm just, I couldn't put the book down. I mean, I haven't read the whole book, but I was just fascinated by the early life that led up to the marriage and to the pioneering efforts, you know, and to when he became Knight of Baha'u'llah in 54, I believe, and then became hand of the cause of God. I mean, it's just really thrilling. So, oh, Mr. Munir, nice to see you, and Mahtab. And
very happy that your generation from the Night of Baha'u'llah, we blessed to have the words and the same emotional you are giving us. Thank you.
Thank you, Munir. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank
The
you
way
for
of spirit, the way of blessings, your God you received and we sharing with others is not less than your grandfathers.
Thank you, Munir. Thank you, Munir. Yeah. Listen, we all need to get inspired by reading. I mean, you know, in addition to reading the writings and praying and the histories, we really have to make efforts to go dig in the lives of all these Baha'is that have been. I mean, people are writing their stories, but some people write in more detail than others. You've got to know the stories because everybody right in front of me here has stories. I'm sure Mr. Mahmoudi can tell you stories of his own life, and Mr. Baruch can tell you stories of his life, and Paul also, and Madame Ihsani, and my brother, and Sudabe. I mean, you know, Sudabe was a pioneer too, and Farib. I'm sure, you know, I'm just sorry because I'm the one kicking off this Zoom. I tend to speak more because I'm doing some digging and sharing. But you know, my point is that we should really spend time, all of us, I'm sure we do. I haven't, like when this book, just to tell you the true story, this book, when I first read it, when I first looked at it, is so thick and there's so much details that I didn't feel like opening it, because it's like his wife was documented through her own knowledge and through the people around the world that had known Dr. Muhajir, institutions and believers. So I just opened it at one page, just by pure, just out of like that. I figured, let me just open this book and see. And this is what I found. You'll excuse me for maybe this is a bit light, but this is what I found. I picked it up at page 332. Now this book has 686 pages. I mean, it's a lot of pages. So it said here, Rahmat traveled by train across Hong Kong up to Shon Soi at the Chinese border and showed the friends how they could teach, which is basically what he was doing all his life, just showing them and helping them and inspiring them. So he told them to go to restaurants and cafes and befriend people to whom they could give the massage. So, it was funny, it's supposed to be to give the message, but it came out as to give them massage. I figured Baha'is start giving massages, now this is amazing, but of course, a typo. But the typo kind of tickled me, and I finished the sentence because it says, he told them that the Chinese people are hospitable and friendly and would listen to what we have to say. So I stopped with this massage business and said, my God, sometimes we make all these mistakes, and it's kind of funny, somebody reading it. Anyway, so that kind of made me start going to page 1, start reading the early life of Mr. Muhajir, because it's monumental work. I mean, there's so much he did. It is superhuman. And Muhajir died young, like Kolinga died definitely, but died young, and beloved guardian died at the age of 60. I mean, the amount of work they do, they have done in their lives, it's incredible. You can't, non-stop, no rest, and all night praying. I mean,